Hello, I'm Tomer and I'm responsible for the messaging in-app SDK. Today I'll explain the basics of the product and show you how consumers can experience messaging within a brand's app. In this example, we show how the app owner can invite consumers to start a messaging conversation with a CCP, Customer Care Professional, or agent. For example, if the consumer already tried to find an answer to the question in the self-service area, they can be encouraged to contact an agent with this large button at the bottom of the screen. Or, the consumer may choose at any point to tap the chat icon at the top right-hand side of the screen and immediately start a messaging conversation with an agent. The SDK integrates into the brand's app, shares the same design theme, and becomes a part of it. While the button used to initiate messaging is implemented by the app's developers, the messaging conversation screen can be controlled by the SDK. The host app can optionally be in control on the navigation bar. In this case, the messaging conversation screen is handled by the SDK, but the navigation bar is controlled by the app, giving more flexibility to developers. The SDK consists of some very simple APIs to support the messaging experience. The Initialize API simply initializes the SDK and should be called upon launching the app. The developer sets the LiveEngage account ID using this API. The Set User Profile API sets the name of the consumer, as will be shown to the CCP when starting a conversation. The Register Push Notification API should be used to connect to the app's push notification mechanism and be able to utilize it to alert consumers whenever an incoming message arrives. The Handle Push API displays an in-app notification overlaying any host app screen. It should be called whenever a push notification is received in the app while it's running. The Show Conversation API invokes the messaging conversation screen and displays it. On the phone screen, you can now see a brand's app. Let's say this brand is called Z-Mobile and they already have several screens related to billing, service, and sales. Now, the consumer types a message and gets notified about the expected response time. Since this is a first-time customer, the system gives him a short response time of 5 minutes. The consumer may now leave the app and continue with their day. When the agent responds, the consumer will be notified via the app push notification system and will be able to get back to the app and continue the conversation. When the CCP and consumer have resolved the query, either one of them can mark the conversation as resolved. Now, our consumer has a new question they'd like to ask. Let's start a new conversation, but this time we get a longer response time, since the consumer is no longer a first-time customer. But since this issue is urgent, they choose to mark the conversation as urgent and get a faster response time. The CCP then responds, and when reaching a resolution, can mark the conversation as such. I just demonstrated use cases where a consumer initiated a conversation, but sometimes the CCP needs to reach out to the consumer and offer proactive service or an upsell opportunity. In this case, the CCP can choose to proactively contact the consumer and restart the conversation. The consumer will get a push notification and will be able to respond to the CCP. That's our demo for today. To conclude, the in-app messaging SDK lets consumers interact with brands from within the app while building a long-lasting personal relationship and increase satisfaction, retention, and sales. For any other questions, please contact me and I'll be glad to help.